Добрый день, дорогие друзья. Мы рады представить очередное интервью в рамках
Good day to you, dear friends. We are doing another interview, and we are doing an interview which is called Dialogues at the project Stravinsky.online, which is funded by Krokhalev. So, and we are introducing the Swiss music scene. So, good day to you, Serge. Your work is very inspiring with its width of very different things. So in 2018, you became the artistic director of a very known ensemble Contrechamps. So can you tell us how this ensemble appeared in your life and you in the life of the ensemble?
Yes, happily. I was living in London at the time and active as a freelancer, performer, teacher, composer, curator, and a friend of mine who plays in the ensemble told me that the group was looking for a new director, and I wasn't really looking for a job, but I thought, I had been programming a series in Kammerklang at Café Otto for 5 years, and I really enjoyed the curating side of my practice, and so I thought, okay, I'll try, and then I got the job, and so that's how it started, and then moved to Geneva from London to be able to fully take the position.
So, can you tell us during those years what projects together have you realized?
Of course. So since I arrived, it was of course a very particular time because I arrived in April 2018. The next season was mostly already programmed from my predecessor. There were two projects that I suggested. One is called Sound Sculptures, and then another one with Mariana Maché, electronic music. So these are the two projects that I did in the first year, and mostly otherwise I was there to program the following season and then follow up with the realization of the first one. And of course, as you know, so I programmed my first season was the 2019-2020 season, and we were able to realize half of it, and then of course the COVID happened. And so so it's been a little bit special because I programmed 2 seasons with Contrechamps, but we did half a season normally, and then it all became a little bit complicated. Nevertheless, I'm super happy with what we've been able to do. We did loads of commissions and really explored also many different formats for concerts, installation concerts, outdoor concerts, very short, very long formats. So it's been really, really interesting to work here, and I'm really happy about it. Even though I'm looking forward to being able to realize concerts normally.
So 2020 was quite a difficult one, softly saying, for all musicians, and especially collectives and. Can you talk about the project that you could realize during this difficult time? Maybe they were like distant projects, or online projects, or any sort of laboratories, as we say, like workshops or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, we had several good surprises with the ensemble. We were supposed to start the year to go with a tour to Mexico. So of course this didn't happen, but we did a virtual tour. And to do that, we started working with virtual reality, with the Oculus glasses and the synthesizer inside. And so we really dived into technologies in a way that I wouldn't have dared if there was not outside pressure. We also really produced some works at a distance. So there was nice things. I'm going to just expand a little bit on this VR, virtual reality thing. It's called Patch XR. And it was really like a whole world that opened. It's instruments, but they're virtual. And it's really quite, in a way, if we talk, it's quite close to my my interest in a way that it's really about instruments, about instrumental practice. But on the other hand, it's really like connected and looking towards the future. So that's nice. And from this little tour, we did another workshop, and now we are planning a 1 or 2 year research project with the conservatoire here in Geneva. So it's from this little spark that came from the cancelled tour to Mexico. We now have a 2 year research program, and I think that was one of the good surprises.
Yes, so the 2020 also opens up very new possibilities that you could not have thought of.
So another good surprise we had is that one of our concerts we did in streaming was picked up by a record label to do a CD. So we will release a CD from our live streaming of Music for 18 Musicians by Steve Reich that we did without an audience. But then the label saw it, and now we're going to release a CD and a vinyl. And for the release, we will project the streaming in a cinema. So we will tell people to come in person to see this film. And so, yeah, there are many small things that happened that were also really good learning opportunities.
So it's very interesting. Thank you. So in the future, what do you think when you are thinking of a program, when you're thinking of a concert? So what is important? Well, it's not about the future, I guess, but what is important for you when you are doing the lineups, the programs?
There are several things that are important to me in terms of programming. I guess I see the ensemble Contrechamps to have one side which is geared towards the audience in Geneva and the scene in Geneva. So it's important for us to also to present famous works, known pieces. We did Sur un Cis by Boulez. We did Music for 18 Musicians by Steve Reich. We did so this is important to me to show it in Geneva because there's no other ensemble that plays this repertoire in Geneva. It's also important to collaborate with artists from Geneva to give them a platform to develop. And then the other side for me is it's important to be part of the scene of the European or the world scene to look out for what where the research is going, where the new trends are going, how to get involved and to support artists that really bring new directions. And of course, the favorite moments are when all these three things come together, that an artist from the region is involved in a practice that is maybe more global, and that the audience is interested in that. Of course, that is perfect, but I know it's not always possible. So I try to focus at least on one of these three focal points. And it's not in every program. Sometimes I also really like to mix programs. I prefer a program with very contrasting aesthetics, very contrasting approaches in it. I prefer it as a programmer, and I also prefer it as an audience when I go out. That is really something that I learned in London. Maybe we talk about it later. When I was programming Kammerklang, I really realized that I enjoy a night with, say rock, contemporary, pop, and salsa, whatever. I enjoy that. I enjoy this mixture, and I try always to remember that as an audience, I really enjoy this diversity.
So, for example, in Russia, still there is, periodically it happens, the disconnect between the public, the audience, and the scene, the musicians. So, the public is not very often ready to hear the experimental music. So, of course, it's the audience is growing year by year, and they are more educated in this field and more interested. But still, there is this sort of fear that something could be perceived not in a way that it was intended. Something might be misunderstood. So do you face those kinds of problems, or your audience is quite loyal and open to your experiments and trust you in this?
Well, again, I can. It's hard for me to talk about the Geneva audiences because I have almost not met them. I met them for 1 year, which was not my season, and then for half a year, and then we didn't really see them all that much anymore. But from what I could perceive, there is a lot of trust, and it's still niche. Yeah? We don't have big audiences, maybe 150 people who come to concerts. When it's bigger, we can go a bit higher. Depends also on the partnerships we have. But I feel the general vibe, is good. People are really curious and they come for experimentation. Now, having said that, I think also the diversity in the program helps a lot. I'm always trying to make a program where people will like one thing. Maybe I program 3 things that night, and I know they will like one, and that's fine for me. So there's more people more people know they will like one thing. They take the risk, they discover something else. Maybe they like something else that they didn't know before. But it's kind of, I don't try to put all my eggs in the same basket. I think it's okay if people don't like half the program. It's more important for me that they really remember one thing that they liked, or that they enjoyed, or they found interesting. Liking is still a complicated term, but that they enjoy.
And I think that, in any concert, anybody from the audience would find something that they might like more. And you also said that you give commissions to young composers, or maybe not to young composers. So who usually writes for your ensemble?
Well, it's I guess we do about 7 to 10 commissions every year. It depends really. It's the same rules for me. Some commissions go to composers that are younger or more local. Some commissions go to composers who have really are at the avant-garde on the scene in Europe or in the world, about in the way they really look for new paths. And then we also sometimes commission really more famous composers for a new piece. And it's a preview because we only announced the program. I don't know if it's a preview. We announced the program next Tuesday. But next year, for example, we will have a co-commission from Peter Edvers. So really big name with 3 other ensembles, big thing. We have a commission by Joanna Bailey, who is a composer British composer based in Berlin. And I think her work is really pushing for new ideas. She mixes video and sound in ways that I find really interesting. And another example that is a little bit at the border is Erika Stucki. She's a Swiss-American artist. She does experimental folk, yodel, really interesting mix. And she's quite known in Switzerland, but she's also has something that I find very strong to propose. And it's aesthetically really a big jump from the new music that maybe what people think when we say new music. So yeah. These are 3 examples. And we also always work with the conservatoire here. So we have 3 students each year who write a piece for us as well. So I really try to cover a wide range of experiences, aesthetics, and also kind of level of experience. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any experience with working with Russian composers?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, Contrechamps is going to be in the Remusique Festival next year. So, but I haven't worked with them before, and I'm trying to think whether I worked directly with Russian composers. With Contrechamps, I'm not sure. I know the ensemble played one of Dmitry Kuryansky's pieces before, but now I'm not so sure. And then I had this experience also with Studio for New Music in Moscow as a composer a few months ago. They did this peer-to-peer workshop, and so I was involved, but more as a composer collaborator with the ensemble. So I was in touch with them, and I'm going to say also that I really like Russia. I love Russia. I traveled in Russia 20 years ago now. Almost 20 years ago, I took the Trans-Siberian train from Moscow to Vladivostok and then back with the Baikal-Amurski Magistral. And it was a crazy trip, but I made some friends there. And sadly, I haven't been back in Russia since, but it was a good trip. So I really like this country.
Yes, I can imagine that this was quite a crazy trip, maybe in a good way, but because not by far not a lot of Russians can really say that they've relived that experience. As for the news for music, I still, again, don't know whether it's a secret or not. So we will just keep that in mind and correct our plans for the next year.
I don't think it's a secret. I think
yes, and thank you very much. And I really hope that we see each other there live next year. So you said that you worked in London and you studied at the Royal Academy of Music. Is it correct? And you studied, and you also Royal College of Music. I'm sorry, and you also taught there.
Okay. Yeah, I first went to London in 2009 to study. I did an intensive master's at the Royal College of Music. And then I wasn't sure what to do, but then I started working with the London Sinfonietta and then with some of the orchestras. And then I had not a lot first, but some freelance work also in Baroque music. It was really, really exciting and challenging environment. So I decided to stay. I always decided to stay one more year and one more year and one more year. In the end, it was almost 10 years that I stayed there. And so I studied at the Royal College of Music. And a few years later, we were on tour with my professor there, David Hawkins. And I said, but we should do a percussion quartet. We don't have a percussion quartet at the college. And so he said, okay, come and do it. So I started doing that. And in parallel, I also took over the experimental music class, which is a class at Royal College for master students, where we looked at open scores, instruction-based scores, graphic scores, music with electronics, all the things that don't really find a place in the curriculum. We did them, and that was also really super exciting. It was it was also very impressive. The level, there were saxophone players, violinists, whatever, all the instruments, and the level was really extremely high. And we were looking at these crazy scores with very, very strong musicians who really, really wanted to do it. So it was really, really special.
Well, for me, this is a very big question. How can you really teach an experimental music? It's extremely interesting. And so if I understand this correctly, you discussed it from the performer's perspective more. So for me, as a musical theoretician, it's not as clear how to find the approach to the score that is unique. And I have, so to say, like with the traditional musical analysis, I cannot really approach, and it's a lot of scores, so it doesn't work. And I have to, each time you have to invent the language of description. How did you look through the scores with the performers, or who were the people?
Yes, it was a group of performers, about 10, 15, depending on the year. And we really looked at open scores. So, for example, there's these Lamonte Young pieces, which is just an interval. It's a fifth interval, and it says hold for a long time. And so this is the scores, this is the instruction. And then one has to make choices as performers, of course. How are we going to do this? How are we going to get into it? And then make a version of it. And indeed, there's not music analysis in the same sense, but in another way, it's also music that is composed. It's going to be not the same, but similar each time. And there's also, for example, a piece of Jennifer Walsh that I like, which is about skateboarding. And the performer has to imagine that she or he is on a skateboard and going through a parkour and thinking, okay, I'm going down now, and thinking that in their head, and then using their instrument to play that. So there is a score. The score is imagined. The score is the instruction as to how to imagine a parkour, and then The musician has to translate that experience into sound. So these are the kind of scores that we did, very open, and in a way, some are less open. We also did pieces by Tom Johnson, which are counting duets, where it's about two people counting in different ways, and there's number games between the two. But they are written out. So it's really about opening this window of freedom also for performers. But still, the composition exists as any other composition. Sometimes they're not so detailed in their notation, but the idea, the concept, and the content of the piece is in the score, and then the interpretation gives a lot of space to performers, and that's something which I think is really important in the institution, in a way classical training, because it is still classical training. Is that things are very, very restricted. We don't feel like we're allowed to even make a crescendo. It's like, oh no, we can't. Mozart didn't write a crescendo. We don't do a crescendo. But I think in a way, for the music to live, we have to take a little bit more freedom with all these things. And these pieces somehow focus on that aspect of taking only the freedom. There's very little that is fixed, and then there's a lot of freedom. And we still have this practice as interpreters. There's a lot of discipline that goes into it. We make choices. We decide what to do. It's not improvised in that sense. It's just that the interpreters make choices to realize, to give life to the work.
Thank you very much. And with improvisation, for me, it's a very big question. I, for myself, have decided this, but I wanted to know your opinion. So what is the principal difference, the major difference between improvisation and experimental music?
It's a good
experimental compositions.
Yeah, it's a good question. For me, I guess I solved it for myself as a performer, saying that I'm not an improviser. Improvising is a practice, and the person who composes, the improviser is live composition. Improvisation is more like live composition. The person who does it is also bringing in the ideas for it. And I didn't do so much. I can of course improvise a little bit, but I wouldn't qualify myself as an improviser. However, if you as a composer write on a score as an instruction, improvise, and then you give this to me as a score, then I will do it happily, because it's not going to be so much about me improvising. It's going to be about me making music that I think is in your head, in a way, or that from what I know of your other compositions and the context in which we played, there's a lot of information that I have where I can make up this music. And I think that's maybe a difference between improvising and experimental music, is that in one, everything is made live, and in the other, the thoughts and the reflection about the piece, about the content, about what should and shouldn't be in it is done in a longer time frame. So I think that could be a good difference. And then even if I myself compose an experimental piece and perform it myself, it's not going to be the same as if I improvise, because I will have taken more time to think about what the piece could be and couldn't be. And even if the sound at the end is the same, the process is not the same. And I think that's, for me, that's how I solve it, because I've been asked a lot to improvise also. And I said, no, you have to write it on a piece of paper.
So if I understand correctly, in many experimental compositions, the musical material when being performed, not the result, not the idea, but the music itself, can be quite drastically different.
Yeah.
So what is the core of this experimental composition, or what is the musical experiment then?
Well, I guess it's exactly that. It's the thoughts and the ideas that went into making the piece, regardless of somehow how they materialize in practice. But the idea, the center of the piece, the concept is always the same. I think that's what it is. And sometimes we can hear it, sometimes we maybe cannot hear it, but ideally we can hear it or we can perceive it for sure. The concept, I think it's important that the piece also is able to carry the meaning through. But really, exactly, it doesn't need to be the same expression of this idea. This idea can have different lives and still come back to the same process or the same concept or same content.
Thank you very much. And for theoreticians with a classical education, this topic is quite specific and quite peculiar. And well, I very often, as a big fan of experimental music, I still I face those questions sometimes with a negative context. So, and I'm very thankful to you for the answer. So, what do you think? Can you call experimentalism a specific musical genre, as in, well, let's say, like, as in minimalism, as in experimentalism? Can this be a specific direction, or is it something of a different kind?
I think I get it.
So can you have it as a special, like a certain genre? Can you call it that?
I don't think aesthetically, in any case, we can categorize it. I think aesthetically it can really be anything and everything, and I think there can be minimalist experimental music and tonal experimental music and microtonal experimental music, and in a way, I don't know that it's necessary to categorize it. I think in the way the scores are written, there's really a category that has become something, for example, instruction-based scores, text scores, where the text says, okay, do this and do that, or don't do this and don't do that. That has become a topic. There's a nice book by James Saunders and John Lilly called I forgot the title, but it's a nice book with about 20-30 examples of many different instruction-based scores, and that's as of itself is a topic. But the way how these pieces sound is completely open, but the way they are thought and written down somehow comes into this category. The same maybe goes to graphic scores. So yeah, the same goes to open scores where the music is written but not the instrumentation. So in any instrument can play that piece. So there are some subcategories, I guess, in the way the pieces are written, but aesthetically, I don't think so. And one thing which is important to me also that I realized slowly, I realized when a friend told me after a concert, look, a friend from school that is not a musician, and he told me, look, it's nice, it's nice to see you on stage, but I feel like you're making an experiment in front of me, and that this experiment doesn't work. And that really got me thinking, because I think it's true. In many cases in music, we present experiments as if they were always successes, or they have to be successes because there's an audience, there's a concert. So there's no, in relation to that, I did a performance as part of Roche, the big pharma company, convention. And I was talking to people who develop medicine, and they said in their career, maybe 0, maybe 1 medicine that they worked on will make it to the public, to the market. All the others, they try, and then it doesn't work, and they bin it. And then they start again, and years of research. And I think in music, maybe in the arts, it would be really nice to have a space where we can experiment and be okay when it doesn't work. Because we're always in this situation where with the audience that we have to pretend that it's good, even when it's not. There isn't this space. We did this experiment, it didn't work, everything exploded, we broke the kitchen, and so we're going to stop it. We're not going to show it to anybody. And so that is something that I started working on at Contrechamps. We have a laboratoire, and this is for now 1 week where we invite 3 guests for two days each to work with 4 musicians, and they come with ideas and things, and they try and whatever. And at the end, we do open studio for 1 hour. People can come to see what happened, but we just present what we did. We don't say it was good. We don't say it was bad. We just say, this is what we worked on. And then if we liked it, then I commission a piece for concert and stuff, because we know already there's some common interests and things like that. And that has been really great. Every year, about half the artists, we get to do something really big the year after, and half we say, okay, it was super nice to meet you and work with you, but I don't think we're going to get anywhere with that. And so that really opened a lot of freedom. It's easier to take risks. I don't have to justify to say why this piece, why this. No, it's just to try. It's really just to try. And then in a way we find also the mindset is really more open, and it's easier also to find solutions. So about experimentation and experimental music versus composition or contemporary composition, I think more than thinking that we need to categorize them, I think we should find the bridge in between that allows maybe to go from one to the other, from proper experimentation, really open, really crazy, whatever, to something that becomes like a concert piece or performance piece or whatever, recording piece.
Yes, thank you. Can you talk a little bit about the experimental compositions that you yourself create and write? So what forms and what methods, what is interesting to you?
I guess this is not a practice that is very regular for me. I'm not, and also with the last couple of years being crazy, but I can tell you still what I like to do. It's just not very regular for me. So it's hard for me to make really like a general thoughts, but I really like the relations with instruments and the touch and things like that. So I've done some pieces which really instrumental pieces about sharing one instrument or touching the skin of a drum, or really going and looking for these tiny little sounds. And my music is not written as notes generally. Again, it's a instruction-based score that I made one for two people sharing one drum and one for two people sharing a violin. And one person is spinning the violin like this, and the other one comes with the bow and looks for sounds and things like that. But it's very collaborative. I like that as well. One of the things that I really enjoy myself as a performer in music is to communicate with other people on stage and to look at each other. And yeah, that's what brings me also the most joy. And then more recently, like 3-4 years ago, I started working on more documentary pieces, multimedia documentary pieces. This is when there's a subject or something that I saw that I got really into, and that really had a sound to it for me. So I did one piece about bells, cowbells and church bells, and we went to see how they are made, and we made some documentary footage about how to make bells and how they are used and how they're tuned. And then we went to people in England who traditionally still do the bell ringing with hands, and they have these crazy compositions that they memorize for half an hour with these big bells, and it's really, really crazy things. And then we went to the Swiss cows, and we filmed also the cows, and we learned about how, for example, the cowbells are disappearing because the neighbors don't want them anymore, and that became that was the topic of the piece. And then from there, that one I did with the colleagues, Robert Torsch, we dive into the sound. We take this recording, this idea, these scores, and I rewrote the bell, the handbell part for a cello that was playing in duet with 12 church bells and cello in unison, for example. So I'm trying to find the articulation between what I find interesting and fascinating about this world, this topic that I'm researching, and then how I can translate these impression and these into sound and into music. So that's how, and this is something I really enjoyed doing, this kind of research. First, research on a topic more generally, not only sound, but also making recording and videos and trying to gather an understanding for this subject. And then for myself, diving into what this means in terms of sound, how I can translate the impressions in terms of sound, music, performance.
And if I understand correctly, that in your compositions you are using, let's say, the full complex of things. So it's multimedia, so any sort of media and any sort of medium. Yeah.
Yeah, it depends. I did pieces that are just instrumental. I did these multimedia works, which include video, 1 or 2 screens, and then instrumental playing, and then electronics as well. When I did this peer-to-peer with Studio for New Music in Moscow, I also used video scores. So I sent them video scores that they used as input to and we created together the parts for their instruments based on these video scores. So yeah, I don't do it enough that I have really a speciality, but I really like it, certainly, to keep it open and to performance, staging, video, multi-channel, immersive experience. Yeah, all these things I'm interested in. But
thank you. Can you talk a bit more about the big project Tosca, like the very big one?
Yeah, so that's a project that I did after I went on the cargo ship for 10 days. And then when I was there, I just put my camera on the window for some time, and also went to film a bit downstairs in the engine room. But I didn't necessarily want to make a composition. But then when I came back, I thought, wow, this was really like an extremely strong experience. There's also, on the boat, it's very quiet, there's no internet, no phone signal, nothing. But there's always this kind of vibration that is throughout. It's very nice. It's not disturbing at all, but it's just, just the scale and everything was really impressive. And so I wanted to make a work about that. And so I wrote for a big bass drum that I play myself, and then videos from the trip, from the engine room. The engine goes at 60 rounds per minute. There's 12 big pistons. The engine is like a building, and it's this 60 round per minute thing going all the time with 12 pistons, 12 explosions every second. That's what keeps the boat going, and that was the basis for the piece also, to have this constant pulse.
So just to ask you, for the audience, so the Tosca is the name of the ship that you went with. So you had also a narrator, the bass drum, electronics, and video. So I read the legend, the annotation. So it traveled from London to Morocco. Is this correct?
Yes, and then
did you perform the piece yourself?
Sorry?
And were you yourself the performer of the piece?
Yes, I was. So I'm the narrator and bass drum player in the piece, and I also made the electronics, prepared the electronics and the video. So I made it all myself. And yes, the boat went from London to Morocco, and then Morocco to Sicily. So that was 10 days. We didn't get off in Morocco. Went all the way to Sicily. Yeah. And it's also strange to be on this boat, because there's all these, it's all the world trade. Almost everything in the world travels in these cargo ships, and also the rubbish goes maybe to Asia, and weapons and technology and whatnot. We don't know. Normally they say, oh no, there's nothing, but it's really a very tense environment. But when I was on the boat, I felt so calm. So there's a lot of tension also that made it that I wanted to make the piece about, so that it's big, it's stable in a way, and it's calm, but on the other hand also a little bit of wind. In the end of the piece, you see how it really goes. It was moving a lot, and so it's also very fragile, and it's also really like pollution, and it's a lot of things. So actually in these containers? Rose George suggests a nice game in her book Deep Sea and Foreign Going. Look at the person and try to imagine which items on or around this person have been made far away and shipped. Take me, for example. My shirt, probably. My trousers, probably. My socks and shoes, probably. This drum, probably not. The microphones, probably. The cables, probably. The sound interface, probably. My computer, probably. The coffee beans that were used to make my coffee this afternoon, probably. The cup in which I drank the coffee, probably. 90% of everything travels by cargo ship.
Yeah, thank you. And I actually have. So how did he get on a cargo ship? Really, if I understand correctly, it does not really. It's not open for tourists, is it?
Well, there are special agencies who rent the cabins on the boat. So it was just completely organized. It's just like a hotel in a way, but they're specialized agencies, and you have to sign all the paper that you have helicopter insurance and whatever. But then and then you arrive in the port, and it's really everything is big, massive. But the tickets, in a way, we bought from a specialized agency, so it's possible to buy a ticket
in a box
to go on a cargo ship. It's not. I didn't smuggle in.
So when you just started your trip, so you didn't know what would lead that it would lead to creation of a piece.
No, not really. That was not the point at the originally.
And where was it performed? Where first?
I performed it first in Dronica Festival, which is a drone music festival in London, in a church. That's where I did the first performance. Then I did it once in Geneva, and then once. So the piece Tosca was played in Vrškomania Festival in Lithuania.
And I have just one more question. So we talked about your work in London. So what about the musical scene in London and in Switzerland? Are there any specific differences between the audiences?
So the difference between the scenes, it's there are many. I guess there's first the fact that the funding system is really different. And in Switzerland, it's designed for small structure, or at least small structure really have a path to get funding. Also, if you do 1 or 2 projects per year, you can get funding and do it like that. In England, it's much harder. There are some big structures that get really good funding, but for the free scene and the alternative scene, it's really much harder to get any money. It doesn't mean that the scene is not dynamic, but it really means that it's structured differently. So that's one thing. Then I guess the other thing is in England, the question of audiences is really, really important. So it's very hard to do a series of concerts if there's not a good audience. It's really that's a focus for getting funding and for organizing it. So it means that these questions that you were asking before about what will the audience see or not, and they are very important. And when you write reports, these numbers are very important. In Switzerland, it's also, of course, important looked at, but there are many projects that can live even if you have a very small audience. If you're developing something over some time, the first years, 2 years, 3 years, if you don't have so much audience, people are going to be okay about it. And so I think that's really a difference. And then I guess, I don't know if it's because of this or has to do with this, but I found that the London scene was either, again, like really written music, more like London Sinfonietta, commissions, ensemble, things like that, or really alternative, open score, not really light to organize, experimental pieces, not so much rehearsals, more performative. So that was a quality, and that I really liked. It was really dynamic, the scene in London in that sense. And artists would take risks and organize things themselves, and there was really some energy there. Also because there was nothing else. So and in Switzerland, I also think the energy is really good, and a lot of artists really get involved in their own project and stuff. But I guess the pace is a little bit slower because there's a whole temporality of funding application, then answers, and then realizing the project and things like that, which is good. But that means that more or less one project will take 1 year. And then I guess in London, because there is no funding application, then people just do it and then it's done. And then maybe they do another one or maybe they don't. So it's that I think there's a different energy there. There's also, aesthetically, it's also hard to tell. I think there's this open score culture is very present in England in the alternative scene, but in Switzerland it also has its place. So it's not the same. But then I think really the way that the structures and the funding system and the organizing system works, both in terms of money and in terms of what it means in time. In the temporality of the process. These are important differences. And then in the more institutional scene, different aesthetics. England always had a more maybe more tonal background in music, also Benjamin Britten, and so this still I think carries through. There's different. It's not the music is not as dissonant and as maybe difficult to listen to as some of the European music might be, but. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
And what about interdisciplinary projects?
I guess they are happening everywhere. I don't know that it's more or less or whatever. Regardless of England and Switzerland, I think this is really a very interesting topic. I'm really into it. I also think it's very difficult to do properly interdisciplinary work, where every art form has its proper space. But I don't know that I can say anything about the difference in this approach in Switzerland or in England. I think it's important really to open the doors aesthetically and to collaborate and everything. I think it's also important to always translate the needs and the way people work. Typically, music ensemble will rehearse three days and do one concert. A dance company will rehearse 6 weeks and do 7 performances. And just even these two things, to find a way of working together needs a lot of work and understanding from everyone. So I think it's good to do it, but I think it's good not to rush it also.
And you're not only the art director and composer, and you are also a performer. And if I'm correct, that you were interested in ancient music, in medieval music, I think. So if not, so can you correct? So you played the Baroque timpani of some sort. So did you perform medieval music, like ancient music?
Yeah. So I mean, in London, for 9 years in London, I was full-time freelance. That was my main source of income, and I was playing a lot of contemporary music. and experimental music. I also got into Baroque music, so Baroque as in Bach and Mozart and also Beethoven. And on natural skin, I was playing the timpani with the old instruments with the natural leather heads and the gut strings for the violins and everything. So I was in one or two small orchestras for that, a freelance orchestra and the Orchestra of the Age of Enlightenment. I did a few concerts with them as an extra. I was doing that. I was also playing drums, punk drums in an experimental band with an artist, Martin Creed. I was teaching a little bit experimental music. I was programming and curating or co-curating a Camera Clang series for a while. So yeah, my life in London was really all these things, and it was great. It was also tiring, but it was really super nice. Now that I came to Geneva, now that everything stopped for 2 years, I'm not so sure yet which part of my performing career I will take back on. I don't miss so much playing within orchestras or within ensembles. I don't miss that much. I miss the stage for sure. I'm going to go back to composing and making pieces for myself or collaborating. That for sure. If Baroque music comes my way, I probably do one or two. But that's not going to be a priority. I think it's just really nice to do. And so it was really incredibly rich and challenging and inspiring period in London. I had the opportunity to play with so many great musicians and ensembles and orchestras, and so that was really, really great. But I guess that was a part of my life, and this super freelance path, I'm not going to go back to it fully, at least.
Yes, I really hope that the COVID restrictions would be taken off and the pandemic would go away. So I want to ask you about your plans as a composer. Have you started maybe working on anything, or maybe you have any ideas, something that we maybe could hear in the next time, like your personal project?
Yeah. I'm slowly getting back into thinking about it. It's been again a while that dealing with the day-to-day was taking all my time. But yes, I have two topics that I'd like to explore. One which is dams, water dams, Latina gas. How do you say that? It needs to still some work, but that is a topic that I really want to explore. I really like these dams. They have so much tension. They're making clean energy, but they are destroying the landscape, and they are whatever. They are a solution on a problem, and they are big and they are dangerous and they're whatever. So I like this kind of tension, and they also have this constant sound aspect to them. That there's always when there's water flowing, there's always different intensity, and there's one close to my work. So that's a topic that I'd like to continue working on. I don't really know what shape the piece could take, but it's and then the other one is traffic lights. I also like to work on. In Geneva, they have this thing where every junction is a little bit different, and pedestrian can go here, and trams can go there, and the bicycles can go there, and I find it I got used to it, but it's not intuitive. And I somehow, as a basis, I really like this thing where every junction, the rules are a little bit different. It's like every step we change the rules, and I find this nice. But the sound world that goes with it, I don't really have I need an added element now to generate the sound, because they don't make sound. But it's more like a concept of changing the rules at every corner. So these are two projects that I currently have yet, but I don't have an end date for them yet.
Yeah, sure, of course. When you talk about like artistic plans, it's always very difficult to name dates. So it can be very unpredictable. And I think that, but like very real things from things that surround us in everyday life also interest you, like very earthly things, so to say. So, and this is very, very interesting to explore them, yeah, and to understand how it functions in a very sort of say artistic sense.
Yeah, I get attached, or I get focused on small things, or not so small things, but yeah, in the daily life, and then I'm curious to research more and find out more curious things, and yeah, I like to work in this way.
Yes, thank you very much for this wonderful chat, and I really hope that we could see each other. Well, maybe the Russian part of the audience in the festival next year. I was very glad to meet you, and thank you very much for such an interesting discussion, for the conversation.
Well, thanks to you. It's really been a pleasure. Thanks for all these really nice questions, many of which are often coming back to me, and I'm thinking about these things a lot. So it was really a pleasure to discuss these topics with you. And I also really hope we can see each other in a year's time. That would be really wonderful.